Sometimes some things happen that bring out both the best and the worst in all of us, sometimes at the same time. Whenever a new Smash game is announced, speculation kicks off about who could be chosen to join the ranks of Nintendo's All-Stars. Unlike other fighting game series like Street Fighter or Tekken, who create original characters, Smash pulls from a long list of established faces with their own fans and supporters. It leads to a lot of debating, a lot of arguments about whose chances are greater than others. Frontrunners are chosen, some valid, some arbitrary, and their support is pushed even further as others join in, mesmerized by how validating it feels. Underdogs spring up, fans of lesser discussed characters who feel a deep fondness nonetheless and feel camaraderie with their other supporters. Especially for those whose favorite series, the games they grew up with, have fallen from grace. It makes one afraid that they're being abandoned. Then when a new Smash game gets announced and new character campaigns begin, it sets off a spark of hope. Maybe if they made their voices known, maybe if they pushed hard enough, they could finally stop the bleeding that so many others don't seem to notice. But a lot of the time, especially lately, we get so invested in our most wanted characters that we go too far. We pick sides, separate into basically tribes. Everyone else who supports the same characters becomes an ally, a friend who may stay a friend for a long time after speculation ends. But then anyone who supports someone else, or worse, anyone who supports a character directly competing with our most wanted, becomes the enemy. Lines are drawn, friendly discussions give way to heated debates with what feels like one's identity on the line. Vocal minorities go too far, cross lines, but then the backlash hits against everyone who supported that character, even those who didn't actually do anything. The longer it goes on, the angrier we become. The more our arguments are laced with vitriol and hatred, the more we assume we already know how the other side thinks instead of trying to understand them. We get so focused on seeing others as the enemy instead of as other people who merely have different views, and it ends up hurting everyone. But as much as it can feel like a political campaign sometimes, most of the final decisions are in the developers' hands, not ours. Not that it helps, not that it makes the emotions any less valid or any less powerful, but it's all the more reason to try to understand how character choices are made and why. Making assumptions and never questioning them doesn't help any of us. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it just magnifies the problem. So, when I say today's character has a chance because Masahiro Sakurai is a known fan of her home series, don't jump to conclusions. There's more than just Sakurai bias going on here. It may make the Smash developers aware of her, but it's her potential that gives her such a legitimate chance. Elma hails from Xenoblade Chronicles X, the massive open-world RPG from Monolith Soft and spiritual successor to Shulk's game. Set nearly 40 years into the future after a clash between warring alien factions destroys the Earth, it tells the story of one of only a scarce few remnants of humanity who managed to escape in time. A crew of former Americans whose ARC ship was shot down as it traveled through space and crash-landed on the uncharted planet of Mira. Over the course of the game, the player pitches in as a member of the elite military force known as B.L.A.D.E.s, exploring Mira's vast landscapes, seeking out other survivors and building up their city of New Los Angeles, and interacting with a multitude of both friendly and hostile alien races. There are many ways to go about it, but ultimately, your goal is to give humanity a chance to survive. They're stuck on a different planet, it's a lot more than they can manage, but they gotta keep on standing. Elma herself is actually the first face you see, helping your avatar out of the life pod capsule that protected them in their emergency descent to Mira's surface. A high-ranking B.L.A.D.E. colonel and leader of the Reclaimers division tasked with finding any remnants they can of the shattered ARC ship, Elma is a focal point of the game from the beginning and a guiding hand in everything that happens therein. In that regard, Elma is the true main character of Xenoblade Chronicles X. Your avatar character is more or less a blank slate who takes part in everything and makes choices that can affect the outcome of side quests, but ultimately, Elma is more of a focal point and you're just there to lend support. This is different from Robin and Corrin, who have fully defined identities and personalities and major parts to play in their game's stories. I wouldn't entirely rule out the chance of the Avatar, given the name Cross in the Japanese trailers and referred to mainly as Rook in the English dub, being chosen for Smash NS, but with her more defined identity and importance to the plot, I think Elma is more likely to get the nod. So then, mission accepted. What would Elma be like in Smash? Elma's fighting style is a very distinct one. She uses the combat class known as Full Metal Jaguar, which wields dual guns and dual swords in battle and relies on staying in motion and executing techniques in specific situations to get the most out of its abilities. You could say it's basically a futuristic rogue class. The FMJ's two sets of weapons allows Elma a level of versatility not usually seen in RPGs. Being able to switch between them as needed lets her contribute both close up and at range. Elma's armor is the basic light armor of the Grenada Galactic Group, one of the many companies in New LA who design weapons and armor for B.L.A.D.E.s soldiers. This gives her two distinct options for her alternate costumes. One option would be to take after the other Xenoblade character in Smash and base her alts on the colors of the armor worn by her other major party members. Another would be to simply pull from all the other colors the different levels of Grenada light armor come in. Considering the game actually has an option to wear whatever armor you want for aesthetic purposes while using the stats of a different set, it'd make a lot of sense. Then there's also the option of a swimsuit alt like what Shulk has, though something tells me the powers that be might not allow it so easily cause, well, Smash 4 is an E10 rated game and you know how the ESRB can be sometimes. But there is one other thing they could do, but that's a spoiler. Anyone who's beaten the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Shh. We know how Elma would look in Smash now, so let's move on to the important stuff. We want her playstyle to best reflect how she plays in her home series. The Full Metal Jaguar class emphasizes constant movement to gain ideal positioning. What does that sound like to me? Hit and run. There will also be some elements in Elma's playstyle that emphasize precise actions, but more on that in a minute. Stat-wise, Elma combines elements of what you'd expect from her class with some quirks unique to X. She'd have fairly standard human size and below average weight. Slim, yet athletic. There's more to that, but shh, spoilers. Elma's speed on the ground isn't just because she fights like a futuristic thief, it's also because your run speed in X is notably fast compared to most other open-world RPGs. And that carries into her airspeed as well, based on the very long running jumps you're capable of in-game while being toned down for balancing reasons. It'd still be enough to give Elma the 8th fastest airspeed of the current roster, as well as giving her good jump height just like Shulk. But it's also difficult in X to change her momentum in the middle of running jumps. We can transfer that in with low air acceleration, the stat that determines how easily a character can change direction in midair. So Elma would be able to cover distance quickly in the air, but she'd have to commit to the direction she jumps in. The alternative would be using the slower, more easily controlled jumps from when you're not sprinting, but that's not as fun, now is it? And as you probably noticed by now, the jump physics in X are actually really floaty. Elma's fall speed in Smash would reflect this, making her a rare case of a floaty speedster. But before we move on, there's one more thing you need to know about how the Full Metal Jaguar class fights. Many of their signature attacks have secondary effects that can lead to extra damage or other benefits if they're performed in certain circumstances, like being behind an enemy or at its side. Many of Elma's moves in Smash could also have similar secondary effects. Some might deal more damage to an enemy's back, others might hit harder with specific timing, or others still might be stronger when used during a combo. Using precision to pull off these secondary effects and get the most out of Elma's kit would be key, because just like in her home game, her damage output wouldn't be very good if you aren't getting those effects consistently. As you can see already, Elma's fighting style would have as much depth as the combat system of the game she calls home. So how do we make sense of all of this and create a coherent moveset? Our first step is to understand how combat in the Xenoblade series works in the first place. Battles play like in an MMORPG, taking place in real time and using your current surroundings, beginning as soon as you choose to attack an enemy or when an aggressive enemy detects your presence. Party members perform basic attacks with their equipped weapons automatically as long as their target is in range. But that's just your scratch damage. Your main source of damage comes from techniques called arts. Most arts can be performed as soon as a battle begins as long as your target is in range. But once you use an art, it has a cooldown before it can be used again. Furthermore, arts are color-coded based on what they do. Much of the depth in Xenoblade combat comes from learning which arts to use in which situations, as well as choosing a loadout of arts that best suits each party member and suits your own preferred fighting style. There are also a couple things unique to Xenoblade Chronicles X in particular. Every art in the game is tied to a specific type of weapon, so you can only use the arts associated with both the party member you're controlling and the weapons they're currently wielding. So in Elma's case, she can only use dual gun and dual sword arts. Furthermore, arts in X are color-coded as follows: yellow for ranged arts, orange for melee arts, green for arts that buff the user and/or their allies, purple for arts that debuff enemies, and blue for auras, specialty arts that grant the user unique buffs or properties for a short time. I know, it's a lot to take in, but this knowledge lets us flesh out Elma's concept to its greatest potential. So like in her home game, Elma would use her swords and guns interchangeably. Also like in her home game, some of her attacks would use her swords and some would use her guns. More sword attacks though, since the majority of her damaging arts in-game are melee ones. No pseudo-transformation weapon switching mechanic here. She'd pull out whichever she needs for the current attack and leave them out until her next one. This would be for aesthetic effect, both to match how the same thing happens in X and to make her seem more combat ready by keeping a weapon in her hands at all times. But there is one exception to this. Just as Elma has a different auto attack for each weapon, Elma's jab and how it finishes would vary depending on what she has equipped. Her guns would finish her jab combo with 2 shots that knock opponents away, while her swords would finish with a rapid flurry of stabs. Visually, each attack would have colors and effects that reflect the type of attack they are. Sword swings would have orange motion lines to match them being melee attacks, while her guns would shoot bullets of yellow energy to match the color of ranged darts. See how that color coding ended up being important? And yes, if you've been wondering so far, that's also Elma's way of being able to use her guns in Smash despite Sakurai deliberately avoiding the use of realistic firearms. You see, Elma's artwork depicts her wielding the Storm Gemmos, the basic dual guns produced by Grenada just like her armor. Why is that important, you ask? Because they just so happen to deal beam elemental damage. They can be depicted in Smash not as realistic firearms but as high-tech laser guns, because that is exactly what they are. But how about we bring the arts themselves into this? We can incorporate several of them into Elma's A moves just like how they snuck a few into Shulk's. Her forward and or down tilts could be based on side slash. Executioner could be the inspiration for several gun-based moves, maybe like a back aerial or the finisher for the gun variant of her jab. Stream Edge could be tweaked to work as an up smash. 100 Shells could be shortened to 3 shockwaves to be her forward smash. Violent Streak could be reworked into 3 rounds of shots diagonally downward to each side to be her down smash. Yeah, if you've noticed by now, multi-hit attacks are another Full Metal Jaguar thing. Maybe you could even sneak the animation of the buff move Primer into one of her taunts. But there are 4 arts in particular that have a greater purpose in store for them. These will serve as Elma's special moves. Shadow Strike would serve as her neutral special, one of the first arts available to Elma, and one of 2 arts that start out unique to her and can only be made available to Rook by completing certain missions. Elma would bring this move into Smash by leaping forward, turning around, and bringing her swords down behind where she once stood in a double overhead slash. Shadow Strike would give Elma a quick cross-up option, letting her surprise her foes and potentially get a quick hit in, while also putting her in a position to retreat and reset to neutral if she needs to. It'd also have its own secondary effect. Just like an X, it'd deal more damage if it struck an opponent's back. Elma's side special would be another one of her starting arts, Sliding Slinger. On use, Elma would go low and slide a distance along the ground while firing her guns at a diagonal angle up and forward. 6 shots would be fired in total, 4 while sliding, then 2 shots straight up at the end as Elma pops back up to a standing position. The shots would be short range and not very strong on their own, but each shot's knockback would carry opponents into the rest of them, and the final shots would have low enough knockback to allow follow-ups at lower percents, but not higher ones. Sliding Slinger would give Elma a way to apply a quick burst of pressure while staying on the move. Her low profile while sliding would get her under a lot of stuff, and if positioned right, she'd end the slide behind her opponent, giving her more time to get away before they can try to retaliate. You could also attempt to use it in the air, but Elma would still fall while performing it and go into free fall afterward. It's meant to be a grounded tool, first and foremost. Elma's up special was a little tricky to figure out, but I ultimately decided on Electric Surge. She'd create a short-ranged electric shockwave around her, then lunge in the direction held as her swords thrust through anything in her way. The initial shockwave would create a circular hitbox about an arm's length around her, dealing minor damage and knockback meant more to get opponents off her if they're too close when she uses it to recover. The lunge would go roughly the length of Firefox, and combined with Elma's floatiness and high airspeed, would make her recovery good overall, though potentially shaky if she loses her double jump. Both parts of the move could deal electric damage to fit the name, or deal magic damage instead, because the actual art is Ether Elemental. No, I don't get it either. Alright guys, I'm proud of this next one. Elma's down special is her other signature art, Ghost Factory. In her home game, this move grants Elma and any nearby allies a buff that lets them dodge the next 1 to 3 attacks that hit them, depending on how much you've leveled it. So how do we bring that into Smash? Have Elma mimic the original animation as a green light surrounds her that completely nullifies the next attack that hits her. If it sounds overpowered, don't worry, I've thought of how to balance it. Remember, it would only block 1 hit. Stuff like jab combos or multi-hit moves would screw it up, and it wouldn't affect grabs at all. Furthermore, while the buff would kick in during the move's animation, Elma can't act until it finishes, which would take about 1.5 seconds. If an opponent was close enough, they could run up, hit Elma and get rid of the buff while she's still stuck in the animation and still have time to punish. Ghost Factory would be best used when Elma has the advantage but can't maintain her pressure any longer. No one to back off, and you gain the ability to take a stray hit to give you a better chance of gaining the upper hand again. And for Elma's final smash, I spent a lot of time split between 2 ideas. I considered having her board a Skell, one of the combat mechs used in X. Then I realized I couldn't best exemplify Skell combat in just a final smash. There's a wide range of arts that you only have access to when fighting in a Skell, so if I brought many of them in, then the final smash would be too complicated. But if I limited it to just a couple moves like with the Landmasters, it wouldn't be a very good depiction of fighting in a Skell. So instead, I went with the other idea, the successor to the first Xenoblade's chain attacks, Overdrive. Overdrive pushes a party member's body to its limits, drastically reducing the cooldown on their arts while providing further boost to their stats and damage output depending on the colors of the arts they used. Play your cards right, and you can even restart Overdrive before you leave it, leading to some, let's be honest, game-breaking setups. Activating Overdrive shrouds Elma in celestial blue light, giving her somewhat faster mobility but way faster frame data. Less startup and less end lag on everything she does makes her entire kit safer and more combo friendly in ways she'd never be capable of normally. But if that isn't enough for you, if Elma deals enough total damage within the 8 seconds it would last, her overdrive is extended for another 8 seconds. She can even do this twice if her player is skilled enough, giving her a transformation final smash that can last nearly twice as long as any other. And that is what Elma could bring to Smash. A fragile speedster with a tactical bend, Elma would use her mix of close and long range options to run in, try to gain the upper hand, then back off if she doesn't succeed. She'd be good at winning neutral, but struggle to maintain an advantage state for very long, making playing as Elma be all about taking your time and wearing down your opponent just like if you were fighting a Xenoblade boss or tyrant. Things are kinda complicated in the world right now. Maybe we all need to take a step back and learn from Elma's example. She's both a soldier and a diplomat, who knows how to fight but also looks to extend an open hand, even willing to put her own life on the line to give others a chance to survive. One of the central themes in Xenoblade Chronicles X is coexistence, in seeking out what we have in common despite our different backgrounds or clashing viewpoints. Because in a way, we're all the same, even if it may feel like we're from other worlds. Our next character featured is a bit easier to guess than the others so far. It's a Pokemon character, and if you've been following the series lately, you'll probably know exactly which one it is. Until then, try to live your life as best you can.